So let's have a look at our main body paragraph, and I'll start by modelling it, and then we'll chunk it down. If you look to the work that we had done earlier on in the week, I gave you a flow chart. That took you step by step through. I'm actually going to use that flow chart to help me write the paragraph today. Now, I do not expect and do not want you in the exam to be drawing flow charts. Waste of time. The plan that you saw a minute ago is the one that you'll be using to help you direct your critical essay writing. I'm just using this as a support tool for me today to actually work on the writing process and focus a little bit more on the quality of my expression. Okay? So, surprise, surprise, we go back to the task, the wording of the task, to again help introduce to start that particular paragraph. So I'm trying to link these two ideas together in my opening sentence. That's what I'm actually sitting here thinking about. How can I link these two ideas together? So the paragraph that I'm about to write is a thematic paragraph. So it's paragraph on theme. So I'll put that there just so you're clear in your own mind. And I'll show you how, as a marker, it would be really obvious to me that the candidate was writing on theme. Okay, again, I'm referencing the fact that I'm aware of the genre that we're looking at, that this is actually a play. You could have used main character, doesn't matter. Because it's a fairly substantial quote, it's a quote of length, it's not sort of 2 or 3 words or part of a sentence. I take a new paragraph in order to make sure that I'm structuring it correctly. Now, if you look at the quotation bank that I've provided you with, you've actually got a contextualisation there that would be very helpful for the next part of the analysis. So, if you weren't convinced about the value of the quote bank that I've given you previously, then hopefully you will be now. So I'm just going to simply copy and paste and show you how I can tweak that to fit in with the analysis, with the contextualisation that I'm doing. Blanche, that dreadful way, so big that it couldn't be put in a coffin, but has to be burned like rubbish. In narrating the backstory to the loss of Reed, Blanche reveals the horrific deaths of her relatives. This has clearly contributed to her current psychological fragility. I could leave it like that, and it's absolutely fine, but equally I could change the word fragility to instability, just to ensure that my marker is under no doubt that I am still addressing the task. Okay? So that's my contextualisation of that particular quote, which obviously I've provided you with on your quote bank. In terms of a micro-analysis, so thinking about small features of the text, the imagery there where the disposal of the relative's body is being compared to something that's burned like rubbish, okay, being compared to rubbish, it's that shows us the horror and the trauma that she's actually experienced. So you would not be wrong to, and I don't think you would be penalised in this case for mentioning the imagery that has been used here. Now, what I've said to you previously is you don't want to be doing this level of microanalysis with every single quotation that you've got. You need to be selective about it. But if we're talking about the fact that Blanche's mental psychological instability comes from the sheer horror that she has actually witnessed, we would be somewhat negligent to ignore that image, because that image really does kind of capture the awful nature of the deaths that she had to, it wasn't. If it's not bad enough that you have to watch the passing of people that you love, but then you have to experience difficulties and challenges like that, just compounds the issue. So if you were to do microanalysis, it would look like this. Remember, this is Blanche's simile, because this is the play. This is her speaking, it's her simile. We know obviously that Tennessee Williams wrote the play, so you can trace it even further back to him, but for the purposes of our analysis, this is the simile that she creates. So what you'll see here is I've identified the technique, it's a simile, but what I have not done is go in the reading for understanding analysis evaluation style of analysis, what is being compared to what, in what way are the two similar, what is the point that the writer is trying to make. You don't need to be as detailed as that, and to be as detailed as that lacks the sophistication in your writing. But I have analysed it, okay? I have actually identified the two things that are being compared, and I have actually identified the point that the writer's making. I just haven't been explicit in it. So, Blanche's horror of the experience is expressed in her simile. There's your identification of technique. Where someone we love is treated in death no better than rubbish, so there's your comparison, we can but imagine the emotional anguish that this would create. And that's the effect. Okay? So can you see how I have done? There is actually a comparison. The comparison has actually been identified there. And the effect, the point that I was trying to make, is actually also being identified there. I just haven't said Margaret's body, the disposal of Margaret's body is being compared to the disposal of some rubbish. The similarity between the two is that neither are afforded any value. The point the writer is trying to make is that this must have been truly horrific for Blanche because poor Margaret was treated badly. Okay? I've not done that. That's not what I've done. But I have captured that in my explanation. So why did Tennessee Williams do this? Why did he show us these backstory events? Why do we need to see this? Okay, so the point that I'm making there is that this idea that if Tennessee Williams had chosen to create a character who was psychologically unstable, and there appears to be no apparent reason at all why this person was behaving the way that they are, it makes it quite difficult for the audience to then connect with the character and feel kind of a sense of pity or empathy for them, because we don't really understand where these abilities come from. And as human beings, in terms of forging relationships with people, we need to have that kind of level of understanding. So what Tennessee Williams does is he, over the course of the play, exposes all of the events that lead to this instability, because the point that he's working towards is the point at the end of the text where she's carted off to an institute and you should be left feeling deep sorrow and pity. That's what he's working towards. And the events at Belleville are designed to contribute towards that. Okay? So what I'd like to do now is just to go through this paragraph and show you what is what. So what does the main body paragraph have to do? Well, the first thing it needs to do is it must address the task. Surprise, surprise. But what I've also done here, which is maybe a little bit harder to identify, is I've also made the thematic link. In other words, I have addressed both aspects of the question. And that's the bit that I think people were struggling to do in the prelim. What I must also do within my introduction is make sure that I am using literary terminology. So words specific to literature, to this subject, to English. So let's just have a look to see how capable I have been of doing that. So the other ingredient you need to make sure that you've got is the use of literary terminology, and you're using it appropriately and wherever possible. Obviously, an important ingredient to go into the main body paragraph is your evidence, and we talked about yesterday the fact that ideally should come in the form of a quotation, but it does not have to. You then have the contextualisation of the evidence, and the thing that you do not have to do but isn't optional, that is microanalysis, to be used sparingly. So if this is a cake that we were baking, for me the microanalysis is cinnamon. I don't like cinnamon. If you really must use it, just put a very small amount. Okay, would be my request. And then this bit here is linking the evidence back to task in terms of both aspects of the task. So there, on the right-hand side of the screen, are the ingredients to make sure go into each of your main body paragraphs. One of the times where there's a deviation from this is where you're doing, looking at the idea of contrast, and in which case you need to have the two pieces of evidence, you need to have two pieces of contextualisation. It would look different, but obviously the ingredients remain exactly the same, and the order in which you put them in to your baking is up to you.